بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So today's lesson is about the beginning of study, its amount, and its organization. So very practical things that the Imam speaks about when it comes to studying knowledge, because it's all well and good speaking about the intentions, the principles, the ideas that we must have. But it's equally as important to talk about the practical things, the very, very practical things. And in fact, those are the things that people are, of course, able to apply and they appreciate more. Okay, so when it comes to studying, Imam Zarnuji, he mentions quite a few different points which are definitely worthwhile for those who are looking to study the religion. So he starts off by mentioning that his teacher, Imam Burhanuddin, used to begin his studies on Wednesday. He used to relate the following narration from his own teacher that Imam Yusuf al-Hamadani, meaning another great jurist and scholar, undertook all his best work on Wednesdays. He did this because Wednesday is the day in which light was created, and it is a day injurious to the ways of the disbeliever, though it is a providential day for the believer. So Wednesday is the day. The adab is to start studying on Wednesday, and to particularly highlight this day as a day of study. Right? This is the adab, one of the etiquettes through which has been mentioned in these books, but also elsewhere as well. And it's one of the practices of the righteous as well. So, Alhamdulillah, we spend Wednesday evenings studying like we do, having a lesson like this. So it's not by coincidence. There's wisdom in everything, and there's each day has its wisdom. Each time of the day has its wisdom and deeper meanings. But Wednesday is a day that it's always good to start something. So if you're going to start a new lesson or a new study or reading a book or a new course or whatever it may be, try to do it on a Wednesday and do it with the intention that this is the day, as the Imam says, that it is providential day for the believers, meaning it's a profitable day. It's a day that people will benefit a lot as well. On the subject of how much to study in the initial stages of learning, Imam Abu Hanifa quoted one of the other Imams who said that our elders stated that it is necessary that the length of study for the beginner be an amount in which he can retain in his memory after 2 repetitions. Right? So very, very specific that the amount you should study when you start studying is the amount you can retain in your mind, right, after 2 repetitions. So if you repeat something twice and it stays in your mind, that's an indication that you're studying the right amount, in other words. Okay. Now, these are all markers that people can use if they like. And really, to be fair, this is in relation to more serious study. Okay, so like this class that we have, you can call it studying. It's a general lesson, a general class. That's fine. But these particular points are more focused on serious study. So if you're studying Arabic grammar, if you're memorizing certain books, certain texts, and things like this, right? So in that regard, what do? If you just learn as much as you can twice and remember, every day he should increase the measure of his recall, meaning what he's memorized by 1 word, so that even if the duration and quantity of his study become large, it would still remain possible for him to recall his lessons by repeating them twice. So in other words, he just increases them gently and gradually. Okay, so one of the things that we see today is people try to do too much too quickly, and that is a recipe for failure when people try to do too much too quickly, okay, or try to learn too much too quickly, whatever it may be, okay. Even in everything, actually, people try to eat too much too quickly. It's the wrong thing to do. You'll have consequences. Everything which is done gradually, um, that is the way for success. Um, and slow and steady, slow and steady, slow and steady, gradual process. And that's the same with studying. I mean, people don't become scholars overnight. Don't become accomplished students overnight. It takes years and years of effort. But it takes some steadfastness, but also an understanding that it's literally building blocks one at a time, very, 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 very slowly. Sometimes what happens is you build up the blocks and you fall back down, but then again you have to build up again, slowly, slowly, slowly. But if the length of study in the beginning is long, such that it becomes necessary to make 10 repetition, then the learner may also proceed in this methodical fashion, right? So, I mean, it depends on the himma of the person. That's what the Imam is saying. That although he says if you can repeat it twice and remember it, that's how much you should study to start with. If you have an increased himma and you repeat something, you're able to, uh, you can repeat something more and remember it. Then just carry on with that. Go according to your capacity. Okay. He says it is said that learning is worth one letter, while repetition is worth 1,000 letters. Learning is worth one letter, but the value of repetition is worth 1,000 letters, right? Because repetition enforces meaning and learning. It's a reminder. It consolidates that learning. That's why those, for example, who memorize the Quran, the key to memorization is just revising, just repeat again and again and again until it settles in somebody's heart. Okay, so it's the same with learning as well. If people, if they try to learn fiqh but they can never read, like for example, if somebody says today I'm going to start studying fiqh, so they pick up a fiqh book and then they start reading it, they put it down, but what they realize that their attention is so low. Why is their attention of what you might have read ages ago? Why is their attention low? Because either you try to read too much at one time, right? And he'll talk about other reasons which are very interesting as well. One of the reasons is that you read too much at one time. Another reason is that there's no repetition of that. So we read books in a linear fashion, right? But that's not how you study books, right? Reading a book and studying a book is not the same thing, right? So if you pick up a fiqh book and you just read it page from beginning to end, you haven't studied the book, you've read the book. And the reason that you won't retain anything is because you didn't repeat anything in there, right? So the person who studies, just like the memorizer of the Quran and memorizer of something else, the one who seriously is studying something reads the first chapter 10 times. Read the first chapter 10 times, right? And what you'll realize or what you'll see is that you'll notice a number of things actually. One of the things you'll notice is that obviously you'll retain more because you read the same thing 10 times. Second thing is that every time you read it, you'll think of a different scenario, or the same sentence will give rise to further questions that will then lead on to further study. That's the beauty of Deen, is that you read the same thing 10 times or 5 times. Every time you read it, you'll think of a different angle, or you'll think of a different wisdom behind that ruling. It can be as mundane as wudu. I mean, is the greatest thing you can do is wudu. When I say mundane, I mean the most basic thing that you could do. But if you read about it, read about it, every time or every so often, you'll think of, oh, yeah, that's another wisdom. Did you notice this about wudu? Did you notice that about wudu? Isn't it beautiful that this? And that's what the student does, you see, that that's what studying is, and that's also one of the wisdoms of repetition. It allows you to retain more, but it also allows you to understand more. Okay. Um, and that, it's very true because, when you see, even when you teach things, and anyone who is a teacher who has taught things in the past, um, for them, when they teach the same thing, over and over again, they know it inside out. Then that topic that they're teaching, they know it inside out. Okay, so that's a very, very vital aspect of studying the deen is to repeat things, repeat, repeat, repeat. It is necessary to begin one's study with matters that are more readily understood. Now, one of the scholars said, in my opinion, the right procedure in study is what our elders practice. They chose to begin with a few subjects of broad content because these are more readily understood and retained. They are less fatiguing and occur frequently among men. So I think people generally do this of their own volition anyway. But the point is that um, start with things which are more practical, more beneficial, and easier to digest. So when I say, for example, read general fiqh or tafsir or whatever it may be, those are subjects which have a lot of practical benefit, but they're also quite simple to understand at an elementary level. What you don't start with is if you have a thirst for knowledge, that you pick up an Usulul Fiqh book, or you pick up Usulul Hadith book, or the Mustalahat, or the terminologies of Hadith. That's not your starting point. Your starting point is just nice and easy, ease your way in via beneficial knowledge and beneficial books. And that's also why, you know, it's it's very it's a very beautiful thing in our deen that so many people have written books of varying um, layers of complexity or levels of complexity. You have people who have written 20 volume works on very complicated, in a very complicated, deep manner, technical way. But the same author might also just write a synopsis and a summary in a way that is digestible. Okay, so the books are there for people to access and to read if they really wanted to. It is also essential to write down an extract of the material after memorizing it and then repeat it often, for this method is indeed profitable. But the student should not write anything unless it is fully understood, for writing down of undigested matter blunts the character, ravages intellect, and wastes time. Okay, so the Imam talks about the need or gives another technique of studying, that is to write your lesson down. Okay, so when we talk about repetition, it's not just verbally repeating by reading the book several times. It's not just by revision and repeating for the purposes of memorization, but actually write it down. So write the lesson down. And these are things that we used to do, especially when you study Arabic grammar and things like this. It helps with practicing the Arabic language, but also it's just beneficial to really embed that learning within your mind and within your heart. But he goes a step further. He says it's not just a case of writing things down, but only write what you understand, right? So, which is quite a hard thing. Is that okay? When you have a lesson, think about it, work it out, reflect on it, revise it, repeat it. Then once you've and digested or understood what you've studied, then write it down. If reading is limited, but repetition and reflection are extensive, then the student will attain a firm grasp and understanding of the material, right? So reading is limited, but repetition and reflection is extensive, then the student will gain a lot, right? So you gain a lot from reflecting on what you're learning. It is said that memorizing 2 letters is better than listening to 2 loads of books. Moreover, comprehending 2 letters is better than memorizing 2 such loads. But if comprehension bypasses one and he does not exert oneself 1 or 2 times to learn it, one becomes vulnerable to getting accustomed to this negligence, such that even an easy lesson will not be comprehended. Right? So he says that um, memorizing 2 letters is better than listening to loads of books. So it's the classic quality over quantity. Right? Studying an smaller amount, but with quality is better than trying to learn lots with no quality in that learning. with no real comprehension. And again, we are habits that look at quantity. We might not admit it. We might suggest, no, we look at the quality, not quantity. But everybody wants to finish the Quran as soon as they possibly can, and that's a good thing. But or people, rather than taking a section, looking at it, reflecting on it, trying to look at, okay, if you don't understand Arabic, then at least looking at the translation. Okay, let's, as I read, I want to go through it. Or another example could be that the people want to get to the end of a course very quickly, but rather than taking ages over parts, because that it'll take too long. But the quality is what's important, right? And to be fair, I think a lot of teachers have given into that as well. That because the demand is not really there for quality learning, uh, people just about turn up to very, very basic things. So the bar is so low now that there's almost no bar anymore. That okay, if you come, oh, subhanallah, mashallah, if you just attend, that is incredible. It's an incredible achievement. Um, so it is a balance in today's day and age whereby we have to look at people's commitments and people's mindset and the reality of people's state, whilst also trying to preserve some kind of a level, right? Some kind of standard in the deen, and it's very sad, but that's where we are at the moment. If people learn anything, it's a great if it's a great achievement. People want to learn something, even that's a great achievement. Uh, so, but anyway, we are people who strive to be better. That's why we're learning these things. Okay. He goes on and says, it is necessary to pursue knowledge by means of discussion, debate, and inquiry. It is also essential that one do these things with fairness and deliberation. One must fortify himself against altercation and anger. Right, so he makes, a valuable point here that which links on to what we've said so far, is that to really understand something is to discuss it, right? So when we're studying, and this is a classic example of the benefits of having a good class, or good classmates or fellow class fellows. And if you have a good classmate who's studying alongside you, then it will aid your study immensely because you will be able to discuss what you're learning with that person. Say and students used to do this all the time. We used to do this when I had classmates. A lot of it I didn't have classmates, but for the time that I did, very helpful because they say, oh yeah, but we're reading this in Arabic or reading this book or reading this subject. You talk about it. Okay, you read to me, I'll read to you. But what does this mean? Yeah, but does that mean this? And you think about ancillary points. And one of the challenges for students of knowledge and the realities that students face is that they are few and far between. They're few and far between. And so there's only a limited amount of people that you can actually have real discussions with in the first place, right? So if you're studying Usul al-Fiqh, for example, and you really find it riveting and you find it very interesting, but at the same time you want to discuss concepts, there's only how many people are there that you can talk to? I mean, it's not football, it's not, the movies or common knowledge about the subject that you're doing. So that reduces the people that you can actually just have discussions with. So if you have a classmate or companions who are studying alongside you, is very, very very helpful indeed. Okay, but what that does do, it opens the mind to the texts and the books that you're studying and allows you to really thrash it out, gain a deeper understanding of what you're learning, you see. And so that's why you should always have that. And you can't always have it with your own teachers because, the teacher's there not to entertain your discussions necessarily. They're there to teach you. By all means, have discussions. But it's something that students should take upon themselves to have that. Right. So, but he says not for the sake of altercation and anger, meaning it must be based on establishing the truth and sincerity. And this is why discussions these days are not fruitful. Having said what I've said, discussions these days, even discussing concepts or general themes, it's not very fruitful because the basis cannot be sincere or is not sincere. And that's evident in how it ends up. It becomes a shouting match and cussing match and a cursing match. And, all you have to do is ask yourself, when was the last time someone in a discussion said, actually, you're correct? Actually, having debated this with you and discussed it with you, I don't agree with this, but at this point, you are actually correct. Right? Very rarely will you ever hear that, if ever. And that's surely a sign of arrogance, and it's surely a sign of, um, just self-promotion, and just you know the impossibility that we're wrong is a big disease. It's a big disease. Um, and the Imam goes on in this regard, and he says that Muhammad bin Yahya, one of the scholars, he mentions that if he ever engaged in a debate and he faced a problematic question to which he didn't know the answer, he would say, "What you have compelled me to admit appears to be necessarily true." Meaning, in the debate, he said something, he was posed with a question which he couldn't answer, then he would say that you've compelled me and what you're saying is correct. Then he would say, quote the verse of the verse in the Quran Sharif, وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ, that above everybody who possesses knowledge is the one who has more knowledge. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. That doesn't matter how knowledgeable you are, there's always people above you in knowledge, and that's the beauty. The paths to Allah and the understandings of Allah and all of the sciences is just it's a vast ocean, a vast ocean. Um, so yeah. Um, he then goes on and talks about questioning. He says that it is said that posing questions for an hour is better than a month of repetition, but this holds good only when the discussion is carried on with someone who is a just and candid nature. Beware of an argument with an adversary who is a quibbler of a perverse nature, for undesirable character creeps into one stealthily. Right? So questioning, when we're discussing things, but asking intelligent questions is really key to delving into the root of a matter, a legal issue, or an issue in Islamic sciences. And that actually keeps teachers on their toes as well. Everybody who teaches will know that if you have intelligent students or diligent students who they'll keep you on your toes because they'll ask you questions. And many times it happens to me as well, that sometimes students ask me a question and I just say, look, I don't know. I just say, I'm not sure. Well, I'll check, find out. I mean, there's no harm in that. I don't see any harm in that whatsoever. If I don't know, I don't know. I mean, what can I say? There's no point making up. It's not my deen that we have the authority to make things up. It's the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. But this false sense of assurance that we feel, well, some people feel they have, that they know everything and they must know everything, and it's necessarily logical that they have to answer everything. It's misguidance. It's completely misguided. If you know something, you know. If you don't, you don't. It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, but the important thing is, rather than covering it up, just admit it, and that's an opportunity to learn. Right. It is incumbent upon the student that he ponder long and often on the more subtle matters of knowledge, that he accustom himself to this. For only by reflection can subtle problems be solved. Right. So this is something which I would say comes a little bit further on in a person's journey, where and it's very not everybody has the capacity to do this. That's what I've noticed is that when you study something, you take it on face value because you've just learned it. You understand the outer aspects of that thing because again, you've just learned it. So you're going to learn it in a very two-dimensional way. Reading it back, studying it further, teaching it. Okay, now you're getting a deeper understanding, a deeper appreciation of what it is. But then some students have the capacity to really ponder over something and then um, learn, or Allah Azza wa Jal inspires their heart more so, and gives them new angles and new insights into what they learn. And that's the case particularly with the Quran Sharif and the Hadith Sharif, and matters of the Seerah. And to be fair, it depends. It could be any science actually. It could be fiqh, that Allah Azza wa Jal, inspires somebody's heart, that they understand a masala, an issue, a legal issue, in a new way. Just yesterday, I was talking to one of our guests, who's an expert in Sheikh Al Akbar Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi, and we were having a good discussion about quite a few things. And even he was saying is that when he gets stuck on something, Ibn Arabi's work, um, he just keeps reading the same thing again and again and again, repeating the same passage again and again and again. And then he'll go to sleep and he'll just wait for the clarity to come to him. And when it comes, he'll wake up in the morning and he'll write it down, right? So that's exactly what I mean, is that um, you know, they people just ponder over things, ponder over things. But and then Allah Ta'ala gives them that clarity of thought to understand it, but also gives them new insights into what it is that they're studying. But not everybody can do that. Of course, it is, for I guess it's all from Allah Azza wa Jal. It's fadl, meaning divine grace from Allah Azza wa Jal. But that's what we should aim to do. There's no, not there is great value in simply repeating what the Quran says and explaining what the Quran is, and Hadith Sharif is on face value. But it increases people's understanding, and it's you know to extrapolate new meanings and new angles and new insights is a very beautiful thing. So we should always try to do that as best as we can. Okay. Then he says, under all circumstances and times, the student should endeavor to profit from everybody present. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, wisdom is a wandering beast of the believers. Wherever he finds it, he should seize it. يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَمَنْ يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Allah Ta'ala says that wisdom, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah Azza wa Jal bestows wisdom upon whomever He wishes, and whoever's been bestowed with wisdom has been given a great favor, a great blessing. Right? So He says, don't be too picky. If and people have this issue sometimes, that they feel that they can only learn from one person, or there's only one person who can help them, or who's on a level that only this person can guide me, or this person can teach me wisdom, because obviously I know everything else. There's only one person who's good enough, great enough to give me wisdom, the likes of me, right? So people have this mentality sometimes. But the beauty of our deen is that everybody knows something you don't, and everybody understands something you don't understand, and everybody else, right, even Muslim or non-Muslim, righteous or a sinner, they have an insight which you don't have, right? You might not know what it is, but their life experience is such that they will know something you don't know, and they'll understand something you don't understand, and they'll have some wisdom that you don't have, right? So it's a question of just accepting that reality, and trying to see the good in everyone. And it doesn't mean to say that, look, obviously not everyone's like a fountain of wisdom and knowledge, and they're not known for that. But we shouldn't inhibit ourselves or prevent ourselves from benefiting from anyone. It doesn't matter what their position is, right? And I've seen this many times as well. Is you might be talking to someone, or you might be working with someone, you might be discussing things, random things, but something that the other person will say, you'll just pick up on it, and you think that is a great point, and you learn from those things. So we have to keep an open mind. That's what a student must have, is an open mind and an open heart, because ultimately they're seeking, aren't they? The student of knowledge is seeking, they're seeking anything that gets them close to Allah, and particularly they're seeking knowledge because they understand that a true understanding of knowledge and the acquisition of knowledge is one of the most effective ways to come to Allah Azza wa Jal, right? And if you're really seeking something and you're genuine in that, whoever provides that to you, you'll just take it with both hands. You see, that doesn't mean to say that you choose someone as your teacher who's not worthy, but at the same time, it doesn't mean to say that you only learn from that teacher and nobody else, right? We have to be open to people's life experiences and what they have to offer and teach us. And so we have to be keen. We have to be, we have to really have an open heart. You see, as opposed to, because what that does do is that if someone doesn't have the attitude and they're quite closed, sometimes that can be because there are traces of arrogance inside of us that we think we're too good to learn from X person or Y person or Z person. Or there's nothing that he can teach me. There's nothing that she can tell me that I don't already know. I mean, people might not say that or they might not articulate it, but it's indicative in someone's behavior. Say, what can he say, what can he educate me on? What can he tell me? Right? So it's you know that's one of the beauties of being a student and a sincere student is that the avenues through which Allah gives you are so many. You could learn very profound things from the most random person. Okay, so that's a lesson he mentions. Um, then he talks about makes a good point. If the seek of knowledge must make a living to support his family and other dependents, then he should work for his livelihood and at the same time repeat and discuss his lessons. This he should do instead of being lazy. This he should do instead of being lazy. Now, this is something 99.9% of people use as an excuse not to study the deen. And I've spoken about this before, that, oh, well, I'm working. So what does that mean you're disabled from learning the deen if you're working? Does that mean you just like completely incapacitated to study the Quran, Sunnah, or learn anything outside of your work? I mean, we're just complete zombies in the dunya. I go to school. So what if you go to school? What does that mean? If somebody goes to college, what do you want a badge that you go to college? Or does that mean the deen doesn't apply to you? Does that mean, you mustn't have any aspirations to serve Allah Azza wa Jal just because you go to college? Does it mean that, I'll go to university, I'll do a degree, and, how is that an excuse not to study the deen? I've never understood that. Ever. I've never understood it. But, this is the time we live in that we just, young people are now so brittle that if you ask them to do anything extra, they'll just break. They just can't handle anything anymore, right? But the Imam mentions it very clearly, and it's a very relevant point. If you have to work for a living, do your work for a living, but don't be lazy. Do not be lazy, and repeat and discuss your lessons. And it's very interesting how you said that. Of course, this was written a long time ago, but it's exactly the same thing now. When you're driving to work, repeat your lesson. When you're driving back from work, repeat your lesson. Listen to your lesson again, right? Revise it again, right? When you're sitting watching TV, instead of watching your next Netflix dramas, which are a complete epic waste of time, why not revise something? Read the book, repeat that chapter that you started, read that chapter another 10 times, revise that verse of the Quran Sharif, and so on. We're just full of excuses, full of excuses. We couldn't be any more full of laziness and excuses. Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq, but so he mentions that, which is very important. He said, one who is of sound mind and body, there is no excuse in poverty to neglect studying and learning. So he goes further and said, even if you're poor, that's not an excuse not to study. For no one was poorer than Abu Yusuf, and this did not prevent him from learning. Right? So poverty is not should not debar anyone from studying the deen. And we saw this, I mean, growing up, many students are very poor because they dedicate their time to Allah and His Rasul, they don't have much means, and if they do have money, they spend it on books. I see this all the time because the books is the real wealth as opposed to bank balances. So he then says, "What about the person who possesses wealth? Let well, let wealth that is righteously attained benefit the righteous man who plods on in the path of learning." Right? It was said to a learned man, "How did you acquire knowledge?" He said, "Through a rich father. By means of his wealth, he supported learned and good men." Right? So, if we have wealth, it's a great ni'mah from Allah Azza wa Jal for many, many reasons, because we don't have not to have financial pressure in today's day and age is, priceless gift from Allah Azza wa Jal. But then we have the responsibility to either use that money to study or to free up our time to study. And if we can't do that, then sponsor people to study the deen, right? Prepare our children, facilitate their learning in a quality environment, right? Rather than spending money on things which are frivolous and meaningless, invest in our children's learning, education, and according to the means that we have, if we have those means, that is, right? Okay, so we'll do a little bit more, and then we'll call it a day. He then goes on and he talks about gratitude, that the student of learning and knowledge, gratitude for the blessing of intelligence and knowledge also increases one's knowledge, right? So he says, gratitude for the blessing of intelligence and knowledge also increases one's knowledge, right? So this is essentially what you call tahdith al-ni'mah. تحديث النعمة وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. Surah Duha, Allah Ta'ala says, as for the favors of Allah, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ, as for the favors of your Lord, فَحَدِّثْ, narrate them. Okay, so narrate the favors of Allah. All right, we're not people who deny capacities that Allah Ta'ala has given us. We're not people who should deny the favors of Allah. If He's given us a quality, we should accept that. Yeah, Alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala has given me this ability to do this. Allah Ta'ala has given me the ability to do that. Allah Ta'ala has given me the ability or has blessed me with knowledge of this subject. Allah Ta'ala has blessed me with this or intelligence or whatever it may be. And the beauty of that acknowledgement is that through that gratitude and linking those attributes or those blessings to Allah Azza wa Jal, He actually increases us in that. He actually increases us in the things that we show gratitude for. Imam Abu Hanifa said, "I acquired knowledge by praising Allah and thanking Him. As often as I understood an item of learning and gained a grasp of a point of law or a nugget of wisdom, I said, Alhamdulillah. Thus my knowledge was increased." Right. So one of the secrets, people want to learn more, they have to show more gratitude. Every time they learn something, say Alhamdulillah. Look how great Allah Azza wa Jal is, that He allowed me to understand this lesson. He allowed me to act upon this. He facilitated the deep understanding of this principle that we learned today. Right. So every time we do that, that's actually one of the secrets to gain more understanding of knowledge. Because Allah Ta'ala loves it when we show gratitude. The more we show it, the more He'll give us. If you show Allah Azza wa Jal gratitude for learning, He will facilitate more learning. Right? As opposed to saying, look how great I am, look, I understood this. Nothing about us. It's all about Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, so inshallah, let's leave it there. There's another page or two left in this chapter, but inshallah, we'll do that next time. And then we will go on to chapter 7, which is about relying on Allah, relying on God. Allah Ta'ala gives tawfiq to understand what we've studied and allow us to act upon that. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.